Okay, let's get into the notes for 2B, finding a missing side. You know, this is one of my favorite lessons because I can say to be or not to be. So when we're starting into this trigonometry, we are able to find sides, we're able to find angles based on the relationship between the angle degree and the lengths of the sides. So we're going to use our calculator for some of this. And on the calculator, you've probably seen these buttons before: sine, cosine. Whoop, let's get that over where you can see it. Sine, cosine, and tangent. Okay, those buttons will help us find a decimal form of each of these degrees. So to put in tan of 12, all you're going to do is push the tan button. You can see what I've got on the screen now. Then I'm going to put in 12, and I push equals. And you'll get a big old long decimal that shows what you would get, and it's very standard, what you would get if I took an opposite over the adjacent of any triangle where the angle is 12 degrees. Okay, now we're going to round that off because we don't need all of those, so we're going to go 0.2126. Okay, I just rounded that off to the 6. Okay, let's do the next one, sine of 40. So I'm going to push the sine button, I punch in 40, push equals, and I have 0.6428. Okay, so wherever I see a sine of 40, I can substitute this decimal in for it. Because sine of 40, we can't use that really to solve. We have to use it to set it up, but we can't use it to solve an equation. Instead, we have to use this decimal form to substitute it into the equation to help us solve it. That'll make more sense in just a minute. So cosine of 78, punch that in, I'm going to get 0.2079. Okay, so that's the decimal form of that ratio of cosine of 78. Now, how do we go to set up to find a missing side? So I've got kind of the steps here, and then we'll go through some examples. First thing I want you to do is to identify the angle that you have, and with that acute angle, you're going to identify the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent. Okay, so you're going to identify those using a given angle. Oops, goodness. There. All right. Next thing we're going to do, based on that given angle and based on what we're trying to find, what side we're trying to find, we have to determine, am I going to use tan or sine or cosine? Okay, those are the three abbreviations that we learned in lesson 2A. Then we're going to write an equation. The equation will always be in the form of the trig, okay, ratio, I'm sorry, not the trig ratio, just the trig function, tangent, sine, or cosine. Then the next thing is an angle, and that's going to equal the ratio that we'll be looking at. Again, that'll make more sense in just a second. Then we're going to substitute the decimal form of the angle. So we're going to have an angle here, and we're going to substitute that with its decimal form, and then we're going to solve it. Okay, and we'll fill these two in just a second. So let's take a look at how this all works. It sounds complicated, but it's very, it's all done the same way. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is identify the HOA, dealing with this given angle of 25 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to go right here with the 25. This is my hypotenuse. Keep going. This is my opposite. And then right beside it is my adjacent. Then I have to select the correct trig ratio. Now, which sides am I looking at? I want to look for, of the three sides, I have one that I'm trying to find and one that I know. Okay, those are the two that I want to use. Down here by the A, there's no number associated with that length, so we're not going to use that one. So the ratio that goes opposite an hypotenuse is sine. Okay, in fact, I would just put this little mnemonic to help you. So I have O and H, that's right here. So I'm going to use sine. So here's my equation. Sine 25 degrees equals opposite over hypotenuse. And there's my equation. It'll be that form every single time for what we're doing. Okay, so sine 25 equals ratio. Okay, depending on what function you have here will determine what ratio you have over here. Now, to solve this thing, remember I said up above when we found those on our calculator, I'm going to replace the sine of 25 with this decimal. So go over to your calculator, we're going to find sine 25. I've got 0.4226 equals x over 41. Excuse me. So now I have a pretty simple equation to solve. I usually say let's cross multiply. So think of this as over 1. Okay, so 1 times x, hey, that's what we want. X is going to equal 0.4226 times, because we're going to multiply this way, times 41. Now I already have that in here. Okay, so I don't need to redo it. I'm just going to leave this in here, take it times 41, and my answer is 17.3. On all of them that we're finding a missing side, we're going to use just to the nearest tenth. Okay, over here. So with this angle, I'm going to identify a hypotenuse, the opposite leg, and the adjacent leg. Can you tell which ones we don't need? What side we don't need? Well, there's nothing out here for the length of H, so I'm just going to eliminate that one. So I have an O and an A. O and an A is the tangent trig. So tan, the angle is 60 degrees, equals, now we're going to write our fraction. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So there's my equation. See how it looks pretty similar here? I'm going to take that tan of 60 and I'm going to replace it. So tan of 60, I get 1.7321 equals 4 over x. Now this one's a little bit different because I basically have to take 4 times 1, okay, and x times this. So I'll show you the long way and then we'll do the shortcut. So this decimal times x is going to equal 1 times 4. Now to get x by itself, I have to basically divide. Okay, so I'm going to divide by 1.7321. Those will cancel out. So x is going to equal whatever 4 divided by that decimal is. So let's do that on our calculator. 4 divided by 1.7321 to the nearest tenth would be 2.3. Okay, so real quick here, what's the difference between this one and this one? Well, it's all in solving it. So over here, it was just a nice simple multiplication where x was on the top. All we're going to do across here is we're going to multiply. So we'll go back up here to our little cloud. If x is on the top, we're going to multiply. Over here, basically what we ended up doing when I had this equation here was 4 divided by this decimal. That's what we did, right? 4 divided by the decimal. So if x is on the bottom, down here that I'm trying to find, then we're going to divide. Okay, now the important thing is make sure when you're dividing, you start with this one here, because that's the one that's going to be basically on top. So I got to take 4 divided by that. All right, we'll stop here and then we'll come back with some examples.